So good morning, everybody, and thank you for joining this webinar organised by the BCC. We've got a webinar series here today to provide businesses with an improved range of services from local experts on the ground. So we've got Morocco covered, Nigeria, East Africa and Nigeria. This series will be inside knowledge from local experts showing insight about opportunities and things to consider when you're doing business in Africa. Today we've got a series of panellists. We've got David Dawson from the British Chamber of Commerce in Southern Africa. We've got Adeyemi from the Nigerian-British Chamber of Commerce. We've got Henry from the British Chamber of Commerce in Kenya, and we've got Ahmed from the British Chamber of Commerce in Morocco. Just so you know, we'll be going through the presentations by country, and there will be an opportunity to ask questions at the end. You are, however, do have the opportunity to ask questions in a message box, which you'll see on your screen. We'll be picking up these questions and going through as many of these as possible at the end. However, if we can't get through to them, we will follow up with you individually and get as many of those questions answered. If you can't keep up with notes, do not worry. The slides will be available through our YouTube channel as well as the Export Britain website, and we can circulate them if you don't have access. This webinar will also be recorded, and again that's also available on the YouTube channel. If I'd like to hand over to David now. David, are you ready to kick off with your presentation?
Absolutely, thank you. Right, good morning everybody, and thank you very much for joining us in this Pan-African webinar. This from Johannesburg in South Africa, and also good morning to our colleagues in East, West and North Africa. We're going to just start with a couple of comments about the African region, and if we could move to the first slide please. Thank you. Right, this is with acknowledgements to KPMG. A visual map of Africa with some other continents and parts of continents superimposed. It often comes as a great surprise, even to those of us who live in Africa, quite how big the continent is. You will know, for example, there have recently been some health issues in West Africa, specifically Liberia and Sierra Leone. But those particular epicenters are closer to London than they are to Nairobi, for example, in East Africa, and ourselves in Southern Africa. So again, that just gives you some kind of concept of the scale of the continent. There are over 50 countries, and you know, heaven forbid that people in North America or Europe would think of Africa as just sort of one place. It's very diverse, and there's lots of different things going on. Thank you. Second slide, please. This slide is with acknowledgement to the IMF. Africa has been experiencing unprecedented growth in the last 2 decades. You can see some of the growth figures around the map of Africa, and on the bottom axis you can see average growth rates which are forecast between 2012 and 2017. On the far right you've got some developed European countries, on the far left some emerging powers, or very emerging powers, such as India and China, with African countries pretty much in the middle there, with Russia and Korea thrown in for good measure. If you average all these out, you're getting something like 5 to 6% average growth, which by any standards is still quite significant, and in some African countries double digit for sure. Next slide please. We will now turn to South Africa specifically. And let me make some sort of general comments which are not necessarily coming off the slide, although you know, you can read quicker than I can speak as we're doing this. South Africa is the most sophisticated and diversified economy in Africa. Many of you will feel familiar with it to a greater or lesser degree because the trade path between South Africa and the UK is very well trodden, and the trading links and commercial links and social links go back over 200 years. It's fair to say that the business culture is not dissimilar to the UK, And many people that come here say, yeah, it's like the UK but different, and in many respects that's correct. There is a very well-developed banking system and legal system, which of course is very important. The stock exchange is rated in the top 20 in the world. On the general level, there are abundant natural resources. There's a fairly stable political climate, which again is reported on quite extensively in the UK. And from a business perspective, South Africa has long been held as a natural bridgehead and gateway to other African markets, and I think this will remain the case for some time. There have been, on a technical basis, some trade reforms, such as tariff reductions and a rationalisation program, which has been introduced. There is now a free trade agreement between the EU and the SADC countries, which is 15 southern African states, and this obviously helps the trading relationship. UKTI, which is United Kingdom Trade and Investment, has identified South Africa as a high growth market with approximately £8 billion in bilateral trade per annum. As far as we're concerned at the Chamber was relaunched last year and is currently transitioning in partnership with UKTI to provide services for UK exporters and businesses. We will be opening a British Business Centre in Johannesburg shortly, within the next few months, I think, and that's going to raise the profile of UK PLC and British companies in our country and in our region. If I just touch very briefly on some of the issues mentioned on the slide, it won't be clear to you necessarily what NDP opportunities are, which is the third item on the reasons to export to, or indeed to invest in. This is a national development plan. It involves all sorts of things such as infrastructure, power development, and is valued at around about £90 billion. And again, a very diverse set of opportunities for British companies in there. On the bottom right of the slide, we see various sectors, and they're self-explanatory. As I mentioned earlier, the South African economy is particularly sophisticated and diverse, and advanced engineering, agribusiness, education. These are all sectors where British companies can play a role and exploit opportunities. I will go now to the next slide, please, which is a case study, and my colleague in UKTI, Andy Birch, will handle this particular matter because he was in charge of this particular work. Thank you.
Morning, everybody. Yeah, I'm Andy Birch. I'm the Deputy Trade Commissioner in UKTI South Africa. We work very closely with the Chamber, increasingly so. David's co-located with us. So we work on all sorts of different projects and work with various companies, assisting them to expand or to establish their business or to research the market in South Africa. What we have here is a case study. I'm afraid I can't reveal the name, but it is an actual case. It's not one that we've made up. So this slide just takes you through the journey of the company working with our UKTI colleagues in the UK, looking at various markets. They approached us during that period, and we carried out some baseline research for them, which led them to the decision that, yes, South Africa was one of the places that they should look at in more detail. We were commissioned to carry out some research work for them, some tailored to their specific needs. We carried out that work, which revealed that, yes, there was potential. We identified some interested parties, potential partners for them, and then they visited the market to carry out a program that we arranged on their behalf. Next slide, please. So you can see that this process started in April 2012 through a range of the different support services provided by UKTI in the UK. As I say, they then came to us. May 2012, we carried out some baseline research for them, and then after due consideration, they came back to us later in the year to commission further research work and for us to arrange that visit. They made a visit to market in March 2013, and I'm pleased to say that on the back of that, the company has now booked what we call business wins, so business won to the value of around £400,000 over the next 2 to 3 years, which is obviously excellent news for all of us, and it's what we're all about. It's around UKTI and chambers helping companies, UK companies, to enter new markets and to do business. So yeah, we always welcome inquiries. Please do get in touch through your local UKTI offices and speak to us to find out more about the market and how we can help you. Thank you.
Thank you, Andy. Next slide, please, and off we hand over to Nigeria.
Over to you, Yemi. Yemi, you need to unmute yourself, please, so we can hear you.
Can you hear me?
We can
you hear me now?
Yep, over to you.
Yeah, thank you very much. Good morning, everybody, and nice of you to have tuned in. I represent the Nigerian-British Chamber of Commerce, operating from Lagos and covering different parts of the country. Nigeria is known to be a fairly sizable economy, with the rebasing last year as now the 26th largest economy in the world and the largest economy in Africa. It has the GDP is over $500 billion US dollars and has recorded an annual growth in the region of 7 to 8% over the past 7 or 5 years. The inflationary rate is single digit, and in the past 4 years, between 2010 and 2014, the bilateral trade between the UK and Nigeria grew from £4 billion to £8 billion, which was really, really significant. And we think that the capacity for that growth, doubling further within the next 5 years, exists in the market, whether the right things were done. Can I have the next slide, please? There are several areas of opportunities in the market. Infrastructure development. The economy is chronically short of infrastructure. The development would have been a lot more higher if the infrastructure was in place, whether it be in power or transportation or transmission. It's all there. In agriculture, in mineral mining, manufacturing, particularly conversion of local raw materials, agriculture or from mining into finished goods. Oil and gas is well known, and there's still a lot of opportunities there because the country is far from being self-sufficient even for its own needs of PMS and gas and other products. Even though the basic raw material is there, but there's a need for a lot of investment. And then, of course, in services, telecommunication, banking, tourism, education, waste management, the areas of opportunities are just tremendous. Can I have the next slide, please? Doing business in Nigeria, the potentials, well, there's a growing private sector. There's a huge internal market. Nigeria is the epicenter of West African community, which has a population of about 300 million. And Nigeria itself has about 170 million out of that. So there's a huge internal market. Almost any product we sell or sell well, including tissue paper and what have you. Huge potential in non-oil sector. There's been too much emphasis on oil sector, but the scope in non-oil sector far outstrips that of the oil sector itself. And of course, the policy of the government is more in support of import substitution, projects. So there can be impetus in local production of many goods. There is a growing middle class population. There is a very large youth, population, which probably accounts for about 70% of the population of under 30. Can I have the next slide, please? Doing business in Nigeria, there are a lot of potentials for doing business in Nigeria. There's a 5-year income tax holiday in under the Pioneer Status program by way of incentive to manufacturers. There's a low VAT of 5%, income tax, corporate tax about 30%, and there are several incentives in various other areas for those who are trying to set up some long-term business operations in the country. Can I have the next slide, please? Yes, there are challenges, and certainly doing business in Nigeria sometimes can be tough, but the reward, far outstrips, whatever challenges. There's still inadequacy in power supply. There's a huge infrastructure deficit, which I've mentioned. Security sometimes can be a challenge in certain areas, but generally you can sleep with your eyes closed in many parts of Nigeria. There is a problem of corruption, which is being tackled, and it's a major topic in the current electioneering that is going on. There's concern that we really need to work more in this area of corruption. Sometimes long-term funds is a problem, but there are a number of financial houses that are tackling the issue of long-term funds, including the African Development Bank, the Afrexim, African Export-Import Bank, and many local banks in the country. There have been a problem of consistency or lack of it on government policies, but this has increasingly improved, and effort is being put in that direction. And the issue of public sector monopoly is no longer so, because privatization of several sectors of the economy has been given impetus. Power is now fully privatized, and we undertook the largest power privatization that has ever been done anywhere in the world in the last couple of years. The same thing with the ports, the same thing with several areas of the economy. So the issue of public sector monopoly is going very much to the background. Can I have the next slide, please? Yes, for those who are designing to export to Nigeria, of course you will need to do your preliminary research, which is the kind of area in which the NBCC and our battery of operators can help, providing the initial research. Exporters that are seeking agents in Nigeria are advised to get in touch with our house, which is the Nigerian-British Chamber of Commerce, and we do have a vibrant, a growing UK network of NBCC in the UK. Yes, you are also advised to visit the market regularly and to be in touch with your sources of information. And of course, you need to be familiar with the regulatory and the legal environment. And we have quite a number of very good law firms in our chamber who provide such service and such guidance to intending exporters or investors in the economy. Can I have the next slide, please? Yes, for further information, you can see the information on the web. We have a very close working relationship with the UKTI in Nigeria, and we're like two arms of the same body. Nigeria offers tremendous opportunities for those who desire to invest, and it's up in virtually every area of endeavor, including health, education, and some of the ones that I've mentioned earlier on. Thank you. May I now invite Harry from Kenya to come.
Thank you, Yemi. Good afternoon from Nairobi. Next slide, please. So the first point really is about the fact that Kenya is part of a large economic bloc, which is slowly moving towards greater economic harmony and integration with an aspiration of coming to a single currency. And the point about that is that Kenya is well placed as a regional hub. We already have the best air links in the region, and indeed some of the best in Africa. On the population side, seventh most populous country in Africa, with about 40% of the population between the age of 15 and 35, so very young with all of that news. And following a rebasing of GDP last year, Kenya is now being classified as a middle-income country. However, it's worth pointing out that agriculture still forms 25% of the economy and manufacturing 11%. Only 11%. Next slide, please. Next slide, please. This gives you an idea of how what the investment climate is. But I think it's worth, what you can see from here is the huge impact that that UK investors have in Kenya, and UK-Kenya bilateral trade is worth 1.5 billion. And unlike some of our other nations, this is bilateral. It goes both ways, both the exports to UK from Kenya and coming in. And it's no surprise that there are 22 FTSE 100 companies based in Kenya already. So there's a very well-established British presence here. Next slide, please. There are, of course, a number of challenges, many of which are similar to those that have been expanded already from Nigeria. So I won't dwell on these, but instead I'll look at the opportunities, and in particular at 5 sectors. Next slide, please. The first of these is education. There is a large government contract at the moment for laptops in your primary schools. Whether that goes ahead is still not known, but there's a huge amount of money available for IT support to the education. And I think what's important is the associated support that will require, particularly in terms of content, etc. And it's worth remembering that all primary school children and above are taught in English here, and the curriculum, whilst not still British, is fundamentally based on a British-style curriculum, perhaps of a few years ago. And there's a realization that many courses and many colleges in Kenya are perhaps not as no longer quite as well thought of as before, and a real desire, therefore, for people to study overseas, to study on the internet, and really people are looking for trusted partners on that. Next slide, please. On infrastructure, there are a series of major infrastructure projects ongoing, most of which are down here. But I think it's really worth noticing the private sector as well, and the booming real estate. And also the fact that it's been made before is that everyone here is used to paying for their services. So unlike other countries in Africa and Europe, there are no sort of fuel and electricity aren't subsidised, so people will pay, for instance, to use a road if there is a good one put in place. Next slide, please. In oil and gas, despite the drop in oil prices, Africa Oil and Tullow, who have the major finds here, are still very optimistic about the potential for here, and they are still investing, although that figure has dropped. And there are a lot of requirements. For instance, to build the new pipeline will require 500 high-pressure welders, of which there are currently only 12 in Kenya. So there are a number of initiatives already being set up to start training local employees, and that will only get bigger. Next slide, please. There's also an aspiration to triple power generation in the next few years. The geothermal potential alone is over 10,000 megawatts, plus so only a fraction of it has been exploited. Plus there's clearly a lot of solar and wind. Next slide, please. In defence, the government have allocated £600 million in the current year for defence and security, which represents 8% of GDP, so for 8% of the budget, so far more being spent over here than we have back in UK. Next slide, please. Financial services, the banking sector is still relatively undeveloped, and total assets are dominated by loans, which nearly amount to 30% of GDP. And particular areas of potential are listed here. Next slide, please. So that gives you a very quick overview. Here are some contacts for further support. And it's worth mentioning that we just had a very successful defence and security trade mission. Who were able to meet a number of key government interlocutors, many of whom are now coming back to do further demonstrations and follow-up, as well as they were all introduced to local businesses over here, and all are looking for partnerships. And I spoke to one company who had 3 offers in one afternoon from people who were looking to partner with them. So we have our next trade mission on the 23rd, 24th of March, which is being run by the London and Aberdeen Chambers of Commerce. So do come out here. I will now hand over to Morocco. Thank you.
Good morning, everybody. It's Ahmed Amine Eljamali from the British Chamber of Commerce for Morocco. Thank you for your attendance. So this first slide is going to give you a quick overview about Morocco. As you might know, Morocco has been identified as one of the African lions, a group of fast-growing African countries that will drive the continent's growth similarly to what the Asian tigers did. You have to know that Morocco was ranked 2nd as African country of the future for 2013-2014 by the FDI magazine. We are enjoying a quite stable GDP growth averaging about 5% over the last 5 years. Talking about exports and imports, especially in relation to the UK companies. Major export from the UK to Morocco increased by nearly 40% in the first half of 2014. We also have the geographic proximity to major markets such as Europe, Africa, the United States, and Asia. The main UK export to Morocco are mineral fuel, oil, iron and steel, general industrial machinery. The main Moroccan export to the UK are basically wires, cables, electric conductors, made clothing, and fruits. As you might see from the slide, we enjoy a B stable outlook by Fitch's rating. Next slide, please. Talking about the ongoing government reforms and support efforts, Morocco is following an ambitious sectoral plan that is highlighted on this slide. These different strategies create tremendous opportunities for exporters and companies willing to enter the Moroccan market in diverse fields. Indeed, talking about opportunities in financial services, you have to know that Casablanca Stock Exchange is the 2nd largest in Africa, and that in June 2014, there was a signature of partnership with the London Stock Exchange for the development of Casablanca as a regional financial service hub for securities and derivative markets. Talking about the field and sector of energy, we have presently opportunities in renewable energy, energy efficiency, hydrocarbon exploration, environment, water, and waste management. Another field for opportunities is the safety and security. In fact, there is a high demand for fire safety, security equipment, border and access control, surveillance and detection equipment, imaging, and police technology. Education and training is yet another field where there is numerous opportunities. Due to the high demand for UK education and training, there is also opportunities in vocational training across all industries. And by the way, during this month, we will have a webinar on education in partnership with the UKTI. Talking about opportunities in construction and infrastructures, due to these ambitious strategies, we have ongoing projects for new motorways, roads, and rails construction, port, and airport upgrading. We also have big opportunities for hotel construction, leisure facilities, marinas, and resort development. Next slide, please. This slide deals with the reasons to export to Morocco. In fact, we enjoy a unique and strategic location at the threshold of Europe, Morocco is considered to be a springboard or an entry door to other African markets due to our geographical proximity with Europe. We have open sky agreements with the EU. We have a strong banking and financial sector. We have Morocco has an advanced status with the EU since 2008. There is an ongoing dismantling of custom tariffs since 2012. We have numerous free trade agreements with several countries, very, very competitive and qualified labor. And for UK businesses, there is investment promotion agreement and double taxation agreement with Morocco. Next slide, please. This slide highlights the fact that Morocco's strategic vision for the future includes Africa as a major drive for economic progress and expansion. And you can see from the slide that the Moroccan corporate presence all over Africa. And this is mainly due to historical commercial links that Morocco had with other African countries. It is also due to the fact that we have a very frequent airline connection to almost 31 African destinations. And we enjoy a strong banking presence all over Africa. And Morocco is actively capitalizing on the South-South cooperation agreement with other African countries. Next slide, please. On this slide, you can find links to the major governmental agencies that might provide information, but we do recommend going through the British Chamber of Commerce for Morocco, as we provide soft landing support, a business center here in Casablanca coming next month, and we provide all kinds of services and support for exporters or companies willing to enter the Moroccan market or looking for information. Next slide, please. Thank you for your attention, and that's going to be all for me.
Well, thank you very much, everyone. And to our audience, if I'd like to open this session up to questions and answers. Does anybody have a question, or I can kick off if anybody doesn't for the moment? Oh, yeah. Sorry, I do have some questions from the audience. This is a question for Nigeria. Yemi, are you on the line? Hi, Yemi. We've got a question for you. What are the prime materials mined in Nigeria?
What are the raw materials mined?
Prime minerals.
Minerals.
Yes.
Oh, you have tantalite, you have coal, there's gold, there's tin, apart from the earth, kind of materials like limestone and others. It's a very, very broad range, and if anybody is interested, I can send information.
That might be useful. We'll try and reach out to the company that asked that question. And now they're usually accessed via PPP projects. How might one get involved in finding out what? There's
a licensing procedure. You have to obtain a license, and it's not PPP. It's not private partnership. It can be owned in some cases 100% or with some locals.
Okay, excellent. Thank you. Another question from our audience is, what are the main exports to South Africa from the UK? This is to you, David.
Thank you, I'm with you. Main exports too. Wow, that's an interesting one. Aerospace, advanced engineering, Jaguar Land Rovers, fashion, foodstuffs. I would have to actually get a sort of a tariff list from the database. But I mean, in all honesty, it would be a bit of everything.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. I think this is a question for everybody. What are the opportunities for the frozen meat sector?
I'll try and answer that only insofar as I'm not sure. I mean, South and Southern Africa is a major meat producer of extremely high quality, as I'm sure Kenya is as well. If the question is for imported frozen meat, I guess if there was some sort of value add component to it, but yeah, I'm not sure if it was a generic basic commodity, how much scope there would be. But like everything else, until you start digging and asking questions for people in that particular sector, it's not terribly wise to jump to conclusions.
Okay, thanks, David. What about any of our other panelists?
Well, I do know that there is some imported meat, but of course the emphasis is on local production, and I think there's a lot of opportunity in that area for any farmers that may want to be involved with local production. But I also, like David, I can make inquiries on the exact position with imported meat, frozen meat.
If I just jump in before Henry comes on or whatever, I just remembered actually there is a huge import market for imported poultry, and that includes frozen poultry. So yeah, I mean it depends again which sector of frozen meat you're looking at, but certainly the poultry sector is a major import to South Africa.
There is also some import of poultry, but generally government is placing emphasis on local production, and I think there is in fact some restriction in that area, because government thinks that the need is so enormous and it's better produced locally.
I think it's generally Kenya is a net exporter of meat, so anyone importing would be sort of up against the local market there. But like my other panelists, I probably wouldn't want to write that off completely.
How about any feedback from you, Ahmed? I know being close.
Regarding Morocco, it's basically the same thing. We rely heavily on local production, but I will need to find more precise information. The only thing I wanted to highlight is that for any UK exporter, they have to take into account the fact that Morocco is a Muslim country, so there is the halal label. But I will dig for more information about regulation concerning importing frozen meat. And I invite any company interested to get in touch with the Moroccan Chamber of Commerce. We can provide more information in a more detailed way in a sort of report. I can compile that if there is an inquiry in that way.
Okay, thank you. We've got a question here for the aerospace industry, specifically for David. What are the aerospace? How large is the aerospace industry in South Africa?
I'm not sure I can answer how large it is. And again, just to digress for a second, what we have in the UKTI teams is various sectoral specialists, and these are people that spend all their time on general industrial or oil and gas, or indeed one of the people does look after the aerospace sector. Look, I do know, for example, that component parts for Airbus industries are made here. BAE systems are in South Africa. There is a domestic, and always has, there has been a domestic defence industry for some time, and military attack helicopters are made. To quantify it is a different question. I couldn't give you a dollar or sterling answer to that question, but it's reasonably significant. Probably not as much as Brazil, for example. But again, those questions can be mined into a bit more detail to give more comprehensive answers to the questioner.
Okay, excellent. Thank you, David. Question for Yemi. Yemi, I know Nigeria is about to embark on the general elections. What impact will this have on businesses?
Well, the electioneering is on, and it's very, very competitive. Remember that Nigeria has had 16 years of civilian rule, the longest that it has had, because its democracy was interrupted one way or the other by military rule, before, since independence. But this has been the longest, so far has been the most enduring, and the competition is very, very, stiff indeed. And a lot of issues are up for grabs, particularly the state of the economy, corruption, and the need to reduce it in governance, accountability, and good government. We're believing that all of this will add up to good government for the future, and that the election will take place as planned, and that the first election, which is the presidential election, is up in just over a week. It's on the 14th of February. So we believe that the net effect of this for business is going to be good, because if the environment of doing business, if governance is accountable, certainly it will be beneficial for business.
Okay. How far, Yemi, this is to you still, how far long after the elections would you recommend businesses wait before visiting Nigeria? And is it safer to visit Nigeria alone or as part of a delegation?
Even as we speak, I was at a reception at the British Deputy High Commissioner's residence yesterday. There are visitors from London here, even as we speak, who are not necessarily, who haven't come because of the elections. So if you want to feel comfortable, you're a businessman, well, you can wait till the end of the month, but that is the end of February, when the elections will be over. But really and truly, if you must come, I don't think there's anything to fear, really.
Okay. All right. Thank you, Yemi. A final question we had was about what regional African events will there be in the UK in the coming months. I'll discuss this with colleagues at the BCC and get back to you. We can post something on the Export Britain website or email something out individually when we know what events we've got going on. Just to wrap up, I'd like to firstly say thank you for joining the webinar. Thank you to our speakers for your time today. Further information will be available on the Export Britain website. As I've said, this webinar is being recorded and will be available on the YouTube channel. And again, we'd like to thank you for joining us. In keeping with what visits are happening in Africa, London Chamber and the Aberdeen and Grampian Chamber of Commerce are out in market later next month. This is very much an oil and gas mission with a side delegation of multi-sector businesses as well. So we're looking to cover all businesses, and we're taking applications right now. So do get in touch. My details are on the screen. However, if you are based in Scotland, we can circulate Aberdeen's Chamber of Commerce details around very shortly. Otherwise, I'd like to thank you for your time. One last request I would like to make to the audience is that we have a survey which we'd really like you to complete. This will help us in collecting all the feedback and seeing what we can do better or different going forward. So I'd really appreciate your time in completing that poll right now, or through the links. Yeah, or through the links. Thank you again, and I look forward to